The War Council of the Vreth Dominion had debated for 6 rotations before Commander Kale Veyron finally slammed his scaled fist on the crystalline table and ended the argument. "Release the Skorati," he said. "And it will be over in a week." No one disagreed. No one dared. The Skorati were the Dominion's oldest and most terrible weapon, 12-ton predators bred over 3,000 years specifically for planetary pacification. Their hides deflected plasma bolts. Their bone-plated skulls could breach reinforced bunkers. They hunted by heat signature, could track prey across 50 kilometers of terrain, and felt no fear because their neural architecture had no room for it. Fear had been cut out of them, generation by generation, like deadwood from a growing tree. They had broken 17 civilizations. Earth is a Tier 3 world, one junior officer had dared to note. Their weapons are primitive. Ballistic. Chemical propellant. Kale Veyron had smiled at that. Then they will learn what real war looks like. Admiral Darian Voss received the news at 0300 hours, in a bunker beneath what used to be Reykjavik. "How many?" she asked. "Thermal imaging suggests 64 confirmed. Possibly more still in the deployment pods." Colonel Singh's voice was tight, professional. He'd seen the footage of the Skorati on Velhari Prime, everyone had, now. The alien broadcasts had been almost taunting in their confidence. "Watch. This is what happens to civilizations that resist." Velhari Prime had lasted 9 days. Darian stood up, walked to the tactical map, and stared at the heat signatures blooming red across northern Canada, Siberia, the Saharan interior, Patagonia. Drop zones chosen far from population centers, smart, giving the beasts room to adapt before the hunt. She studied them for a long moment. "Get me Dr. Farouk and the wildlife teams," she said quietly. "And somebody wake up the Alaskans." Singh blinked. "The Alaskans, ma'am?" "The hunting clubs. The guides. The ones who track brown bears for sport." She turned and the look on her face was not fear. It was the careful, calculative expression of a woman doing mathematics. "And find me whoever has been doing Skorati xenobiology. I want everything we know about how they hunt. What they eat. How they breathe." She paused. "And get me the Australians." Commander Kale Veyron watched the feeds with great satisfaction for the first 18 hours. The Skorati were adapting beautifully. The cold of Siberia seemed to bother them initially. He noted behavioral clustering, which was unusual, but within half a rotation they had spread, moving in their characteristic hunt pattern sweeps, demolishing every military unit sent against them. Tank columns crumpled like foil under their charge. Artillery slowed them but did not stop them. One beast absorbed 4 direct missile strikes, staggered, and kept moving. The humans were throwing themselves at walls. "Estimated time to full planetary submission," he asked his adjutant. 7 to 12 rotations, Commander." The humans are clearly struggling to adapt their ballistic technology to. The adjutant stopped. On the feed, one of the Skorati trackers in Canada had gone dark. They had not stopped the beast with bullets. Not directly. The team that got it, 14 people led by a man named Roy Austin, a third-generation hunting guide from Yukon, had spent 40 hours tracking it first. 40 hours studying its movement pattern, its resting periods, the subtle list in its rear left gate that suggested one of the missile strikes had done something to its hip socket after all. They identified the specific valley it preferred at dusk. They learned that it was, despite everything, an animal. A designed animal, a terrifying one, but it had instincts. It sought shelter from wind. It preferred to approach water from elevation. It was cautious about river crossings. Roy Austin's team dug a pit 40 meters long and 8 meters deep, lined with industrial drilling spears borrowed from an oil operation, and covered it with snow-packed timber. Then they played recordings of wounded prey, sourced from the first 12 hours of footage, the cries of soldiers before the sensors pulled the feeds, and they waited. The beast charged. The pit took it. It was not clean or easy. 2 members of the team died when the creature, dying, thrashed and broke through a section of the cover. But it died. Roy Austin took photos for his grandchildren. Kale Veyron began to feel uneasy at 40 hours. He had lost 9 Scorati. Not to weapons, or not to weapons alone. 3 had been lured into industrial facilities and drowned in chemical baths when workers flooded their own factory floor. 1 had been taken down in the Sahara by a combination of buried electrical cables and 17 trucks driving in coordinated patterns that the beast apparently found confusing enough to stand still long enough to be electrocuted. 2 had been poisoned. How the humans had gotten toxins past the hide, he still didn't understand, though the report mentioned something about compressed gas delivery systems and a substance called concentrated capsaicin derivative. He watched a feed from Australia and felt his blood chill. In the outback, they weren't running. They weren't hiding. A group of humans, wearing absurdly inadequate clothing for the terrain, were riding alongside a Scorati on vehicles and simply keeping pace. Herding it. Pushing it away from population centers, toward terrain they had apparently already prepared. They moved with the casual confidence of people who spent their lives doing mildly insane things involving large animals. "Commander," his adjutant said carefully. "The Scorati behavioral modeling is flagging unusual stress responses." Define unusual. They are becoming hesitant. Scorati do not become hesitant. The Scorati had never encountered a prey species that studied them back. Admiral Darian Voss held her first press conference at 72 hours. She stood in front of a tactical board showing 41 confirmed Scorati kills and said, with no particular pride or emphasis, "We are losing people. I want to be honest about that. This is hard, and it is not over, and brave men and women are dying. But I want to be equally honest about something else." She looked at the camera. "We have been killing apex predators since before we were fully human. We have been setting traps, reading terrain, working in coordinated groups to bring down things bigger and more dangerous than ourselves, since before we had language to describe what we were doing." A pause. "The Vreth Dominion gave us war beasts. What they forgot to account for is that we've been making war beasts go extinct for 100,000 years. We're very good at this." Commander Kale Veyron filed his first revised estimate at 90 hours. Then his second at 110. By the 150th hour, he had stopped filing estimates and was simply watching the feeds in silence, because the numbers were doing something his models had declared impossible. They were trending the wrong direction. The kill rate was supposed to be purely in the Scorati's favor. The entire point of planetary pacification was overwhelming asymmetric force. You weren't supposed to lose beasts faster than you broke the enemy's will. But the humans weren't breaking. They were learning. Faster than any species he had encountered in 30 years of service. Each kill fed information to the next team. Strategies mutated, iterated, spread through their communication networks with horrifying speed. They had started losing Scorati to traps that hadn't existed 40 hours ago, elaborate, multi-stage affairs that showed planning, showed that somewhere a group of humans had sat in a room and asked, "What does this thing fear? What are its limits? What does it not understand?" and then built answers. A xenobiologist in Seoul had published a paper, mid-invasion, on Scorati respiratory vulnerabilities. An engineer in Sao Paulo had adapted mining equipment into what could only be described as a Scorati-specific ambush platform. A 12-year-old in Finland had sent a viral animation to military commanders showing a predicted Scorati movement pattern based on 4 days of observed behavior data. Kale Veyron stared at the final tally at hour 200. 61 of 64 Scorati, dead or incapacitated. 3,000 years of breeding. Gone in 8 days. He opened a channel to the War Council and said, in a voice that had lost all of its certainty, "I think we have made a significant error in our threat assessment." In the bunker beneath what used to be Reykjavik, Admiral Darian Voss closed the last operational file, sat back in her chair, and let out a slow breath. She thought about Roy Austin in the Yukon and the 14 people who'd dug a pit for 40 hours. She thought about the factory workers who'd flooded their own floor. She thought about the Australian outback teams who'd herded a monster like it was cattle, because that was, apparently, a skill they had. She thought about 100,000 years of humans looking at something bigger and deadlier than themselves and asking, how do we kill it? And she thought about what she would say when the Vreth Dominion inevitably sent a diplomat instead of more beasts. She already knew what she would say. You should have done your research.